call this our meeting of the League of Cities and Towns Board to order. It's March 20, 2023, first day of spring, and it's about 9:33 a.m. Seems like p.m., right? Okay, so the first order of business, well, actually, what I want to talk about, you know, most of us are aware that we've had a wet spring, I think, almost throughout the state. And at least in some regions of our state, we've had some early warm temperatures, which is good news. I think it melts off all the lower stuff anyway. But we're still going to have an incredible runoff. And we want to just point out a couple of things. First of all, the governor's office has been engaged in this issue, issued a press release, and also has put out some materials. But if member jurisdictions need any kinds of help with that, the league office here can be a conduit to try to put you in touch with resources from the state. Or what's happened in the past is that when one municipality has a problem, others have been willing to lend some of our public works resources, you know, whether it's backhoes, trucks, or even sandbags, things like that. So reach out if you have issues. I hope that all of us are undertaking steps. If you have an issue, to, you know, pre-position sandbags, get your residents informed about the risks, stay away from swift water via creeks or streams. But we're here to help. The league is here to help if we can. So definitely reach out if you need assistance. Anything else, Cam?
The last thing I'll add there is I've chatted with the governor's office basically daily for the last week, because they want to know specifically where there are the highest needs. And then I was at the Salt Lake County Conference of Mayors meeting last week, where Salt Lake County's emergency management services presented about the needs. And Reverend, thanks for hosting that meeting in West Jordan. But we know you're having all these conversations with your counties and with your cities in your region. And so if we could be a conduit for information, let us know. Is Councilmember Malkovich on the call yet?
She is not.
Okay, so just one quick example, when they had the devastating fire on Miracle Mountain a few years ago, Carrie and the mayor at the time, Mayor Prey, reached out to us. We've then circulated information about equipment, and then really within hours, other cities were showing up on site to provide services and resources. So if we can be a conduit for information or a conduit to connect people with resources, just let us know.
I think the highest need will be places like Alta and Brighton. Everybody else is lower.
I thought you would get all these bad dad jokes out of your system at Salt Lake County Cod last week. Apparently not.
I think they're wealthy with on more. But let them roll.
Perfect.
Okay, all right. With that, then we have consideration of our minutes for our meeting of January 18th.
Move to approve the minutes this month.
Have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Mayor Tran, second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. Thank you very much. And if anybody has a conflict of interest that you need to disclose, that we have those forms. Nick has some of those forms, or if you want to do it orally, now is the time. Okay, hearing none, then let's go up to our engagement calendar. So Angela, do you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I am putting together a kind of master calendar of events. We did a similar thing last year, so I have an ask for everyone in the room and online. You can imagine it's hard to track down every single goal meeting that happens. I've tracked down quite a few, but I'm having a hard time with comms in particular, and just other various little meetings. COGs are pretty easy to track down through the AOGs. So if you think of a meeting, you know of a meeting on your calendar that would be of interest for the league, especially Cam, to attend the mayor's meeting, you can just forward it to my email, and I can send that out, or if you forward it to anyone on the staff, you can get it to me, just so we can build out that calendar and make sure we're kind of in attendance for me to speak.
Thanks, Angela.
Mayor Sostrin, can I add a
Sure.
couple things there? Angela does an incredible amount of work to try to track all of these regional meetings that are happening so that we can piggyback on them. As of now, her engagement calendar for 2023 has 161 entries. And that's everything from the Utah County COG to the Cache County Mayors Association to the different AOG executive boards. And last year, Mayor Ramsey wanted to join me at a lot of these meetings. And so she made it to almost every corner of the state. Some were on Zoom and some were in person, but like Mayor Shepherd, Mayor Tran, I was with you guys at Davis County COG several times. We were regulars at the Weaver County COG. We have we're on the agenda at the April 6th Utah County COG. Off the Wasatch Front, I was interacting with Travis at 6 County over the weekend because we got all of their dates. We've got something scheduled with them in May. So again, we want to make sure that either league staff or league leadership is able to check in with the groups around the state, particularly in the spring and early summer. So we can both do the report of what happened during the session, but also gather ideas of what's needed. In fact, the local administrative advisor concept started in a conversation with the mayor of Goshen that came after one of Mayor Kafusi's mayoral huddles with the mayors in Utah County. So the fact that I was there participating in that conversation, then led to the follow-up conversation, that then planted the seed for now one of our signature legislative efforts from this past legislative session. So that's why we're trying to do it. Angela is the keeper of the calendar, but you can email her directly at aadam@ulct.org, or you can reach out to any league staffer. The other thing is the governor notified us last week that he is planning to visit every county this spring and early summer and is going to coordinate with us on that calendar. So we'll keep you posted on that as well, so that we can piggyback on his outreach and hopefully generate a lot of interest in those visits.
Can we just restate the ask real quick? Councilmember Malkovich said, can you please repeat? That was hard to hear from Angela.
Oh, just Angela is collecting all of the AOG, Council of Governments, Conference of Mayors, and other similar meetings around the state so that league staff and league leadership can be there. And then we also invite you as board members, when you're attending those meetings, to check in with us before you go if there's information you want to share. So another example is last week, I emailed Mayor Monson and Mayor Danny Van Wagner of Castledale a bunch of information on legislative results so they could present it to the Southeast Utah AOG because I'm unavailable to travel down to that meeting. So I made sure they were prepared with information that they could share. So please use us as resources, but we also as staff want to join you as often as possible.
Thanks, Ken. So I don't know, there's no good time to do this, or maybe it's any time is a good time to do this. But before we move on, I just want to say, we just finished the legislative session. I've seen many of you as board members up at the Capitol, and I appreciate everybody's help in doing what we did. I think we actually had a good session this year, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the staff of this organization is just a completely fantastic group of people to work with. So many of them work so hard to stay up on bills, to lobby bills, to engage with representatives of our board and our membership to make sure that we got the word out with respect to the troublesome bills, and just really fantastic group of people. And they work so hard, they give up their family time and all that during the session. And so thanks, you guys. I really appreciate the work that you did.
How about that was their family during the session?
Their family is us, right? But they, believe it or not, they have other families in the background. Some of them like to ride elevators or
That's right.
go see cranes. Okay, let's talk to Liam then about boards and commissions.
So Mayor, I'm actually going to take that one.
Okay, all right.
Liam is currently busy with a little baby that decided he needed to eat. If anyone didn't know, Liam and his wife had a baby roughly the third week of the session. So he's just a few weeks old now, and right now Liam's taking care of little Otis.
Is that league policy?
To have a baby during the session, it is not
Feels like
for
it.
timing, but
Somehow babies are not good at following policy.
yeah. So when I used to work for the state elections office, my baby, my youngest, was born 2 days after the state canvass for the election, and I told him he couldn't come before that, and he listened. So it was good of him. But yeah, just a quick update on the boards and commissions. I'll just highlight a few points here. With the new boards and the commissions from the last legislative session, we have 71 appointments across 40 different boards and commissions. So we are very involved. And we have vacancies in the following boards and commissions. The Uniform Building Code Commission, the Utah Communications Authority Board, the Utah Indigent Defense Commission, and the Outdoor Adventure Commission. And then we have a few new boards and commissions that we'll need to fill spots on that were created this last legislative session. And that's Funding for Water Infrastructure Working Group, Women in the Economy Subcommittee, and the Justice Court Reform Task Force. So we'll be working with Governor's Office and obviously with the board, we'll come back with recommendations for you to approve to appoint people to those boards and commissions. But if you have thoughts or ideas about people who would make sense to be on those spots, please reach out to Liam and let him know, and then we'll come back in the next couple of board meetings and try to fill those slots. So, Mayor, I think that's all we have on that one, unless there's any questions.
UCA, do you want to give an update on UCA?
The quick update on UCA is they've had a change on, and you can see this on the letter, they've had a change in the executive director of the UCA. This was effective the last week of legislative session, so Quinn Stevens is no longer the executive director of that. Tina Matthew is filling in as the interim director at this point, and they'll go forward filling that more long term. But as noted above, we also have a spot to fill on that board, which will be a part of that. So we'll come back with more information on that one. But as a piece of information, that is a change on the UCA that took place the last week of the session.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, so let's now turn to Nick and let's talk about our check register quarter two report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have in your packet and sharing on the screen here our fiscal year 2023 Q2 plus financial report. If you're familiar with last time we gave you a Q1 plus, we basically split the year up into thirds because that's when it times out with our board meetings. And then when most of our expenses come in for our annual convention. So this goes through February of this year. So far, we've collected 93% of all revenue budgeted. Membership dues are at 106%, and that is because we had not budgeted for West Valley to rejoin the league and for the Metro Townships. So everyone is in there. We have three towns that have not paid. One has made it clear that they will not be a member this year. Two, we're still trying to track down. So we should be at 99% membership by year's end.
Tell me who that one is.
The one that has decided they will not is Clawson Town, and then we are trying to track down Fielding, which said we've been in touch. We've been able to contact and said checks in the mail, and then Trenton, we've been working on in their limited office hours, trying to actually get a hold of someone in their office. But we've sent a couple of reminders to it as well.
And
That outstanding amount is a total of $1,000.
And Mayor Burton, I spoke with the mayor of Clawson, and he's supportive. There are a couple of council members who were not supportive, and part of the outreach that we do each spring is trying to hit as many members as possible. And I think for a community like Clawson that has no full-time staff, the success with the local administrative advisor program will be a huge win for them, and something we'll be promoting. And last year, for example, the town of Lindale decided not to join. I met with the mayor of Lindale last spring, and after about a 20-minute conversation, when he realized how much they benefit from league membership, it was, how do I join? So sometimes it really is just connecting to the right person in some of these small communities. I've met with the mayor of Clawson, but I'll be trying to follow up further this spring as part of our outreach.
Can we help?
Potentially, I think through the Southeast AOG, Clawson belongs to that. And we did a regional meeting in that area with Mayor Ramsey, and Clawson didn't come, but we had great turnout. Also, so I think working with the AOG and with Mayor Monson, that'll be the first place to start, and then potentially other board members could reach out to Clawson too.
Thank you.
Great. With sponsorships and donations, we are at 87% of expected revenue and expect to be just over 100% by year's end there. As well as registration fees and exhibit space, we're at 89% of revenue. with all of these membership dues, sponsorships, registration fees and exhibit space, all of our major general revenue categories, we expect to exceed budgeted amounts of revenue by the end of this year. 58% of grants and special projects revenue has been recognized for both the ARPA assessment and the Your Land, Your Plan grant. We recognize that revenue. That revenue has been received. We recognize it when we spend it, so that we are right on track there. So far, we have expended 65% of what is budgeted for fiscal year 2023, which is right on track with 2/3 of the year behind us. Expenditures for personnel services, we're at 63%. Operations and engagement expenses are at 57%. However, we do expect those totals in operations and engagement to exceed budgeted amounts slightly by the end of the year. Large net events expenditures, we are at 77% so far. And we do expect items in facility and special equipment rental, food and beverage, and travel and lodging to be slightly higher than initially budgeted because of those inflation and those rising costs. However, staff has found savings in convention programming that will largely offset that increased spending as well. As I mentioned, with the revenue for grants and special projects, Your Land, Your Plan is well underway. We had, by the end of February, we had already kicked off 2 of our trainings there. We've held 2 more since then. We've done it in Price, Vernal, Brigham City, and Provo so far. We saw Isaac at the one in Provo. And then we have Richfield and St. George to go. At the end of this period, we are just over $1 million revenue over expenditures. The finances are in very good shape. Given the significant amount of unbudgeted revenue coming in and some of those adjustments to the operations and events categories that I mentioned, we plan to bring an amended budget forward to the board in April. You also will see and then the numbers that I ran through are attached as well. You will see the check register for that period of November through February attached as well. This has all been sent out to the Finance and Audit Committee, and Mayor Hales, who's online, our treasurer, signed these checks. If you have any questions on these, let me know. Otherwise, we ask the board to approve the report and check register.
Any questions for Nick or Mayor Hales? Seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the Q2 plus budget report and check register.
I'd make a motion to approve. This is Scott Phillips in Cedar City.
Thank you, Scott.
I'll second the motion, Mayor Danes. Logan?
Thank you, Mayor Danes. All right, we have a motion and second to approve the budget report and check register. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks, Nick. Good job. Okay, let's talk about advocacy and engagement and National League of Cities and other stuff. Veto letter.
Perfect. And thank you, Mayor. And I want to echo what Mayor Silvestrini said in praising league staff and really the league extended family, which includes everybody in this meeting, staff members from your cities, and everyone who plays a role in delivering at the legislature. On a personal note, you mentioned kissing our families goodbye for a couple months, and that's what we all say internally. My 5-year-old told me the last week of the session that she hated the session so much. These were exact words. I hate the session so much because you work too much. And then on Saturday morning, after the session ended, I've got a video of her basically saying the session is over and we can play. So she's very excited that the session was right. It's sad, but we actually have a paper chain. Some of you see the paper chain that the staff did. Who are not at the Capitol, they did a paper chain here, and then my kids do a paper chain as well. And we're very excited to take the last chain off on the last day of the session. When we come back to the return report piece on the session, I'll let Justin start to talk through some of the key data points there. There were a couple of one-off items we wanted to hit first, though, before we jumped into that. First being a request from the National League of Cities on rail safety to endorse a letter that they are distributing to Congress in light of the tragic incident that occurred in Ohio. We've worked on several bills here locally. In fact, several board cities have been involved in rail issues. Logan City, for example, Spanish Fork, Salt Lake, and others, basically the entire Davis County has had rail issues. So in this past legislative session, we worked on bills that created the Office of Rail Safety here in Utah. But this would be on the federal level. Your packet included the key principles from the National League of Cities on rail safety. And then what Nick has just pulled up is the actual sign-on letter. It was inadvertently omitted from your board packet, but this would be the sign-on letter that, with your permission, we would sign on as the board of directors as the league. Then we would circulate it to our members for those cities that would like to sign on as individual cities. So you can, those on the screen can see it. Hopefully those in the room can read it. It's a pretty general letter, but it reaffirms those NLC rail safety principles. And then we would circulate this to our delegation, and we would sign it on behalf of the league board of directors. So thoughts from the board on the issue, or whether to approve endorsing the National League of Cities.
My thought is, since it has to do with rail, the main thing we could do is train them.
Mayor Burton is he's on the roll this morning, but I think you're going down the right track.
I would be supportive of signing on to the letter. Again, many of our cities are impacted by
You're trying to derail other jokes? Okay, we have is that a motion, Mayor Daines?
yes.
Okay. We have a second from Mayor Shepherd from Clearfield. I agree with this. I think, even those of us that don't have rail in our communities, that we're all impacted by the safety issues and also by the inconvenience of some of these long trains. And there are safety tools that could be used. They just haven't been implemented, like better brakes and things like that. So there's no reason that we don't have a more modern rail system in this country. So
There's better breaks we're looking for. What's stopping you from signing up?
And just an industry that will have a discussion with people to try and solve problems.
yeah. Okay, all in favor of this motion to endorse the National League of Cities position on this?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And then I presume that we will be able to circulate this letter for signatures by individual municipalities if you're interested in doing that.
We'll do that via Friday fax, but we'll get it endorsed and off back to NLC and then to the congressional delegation. I'll mention this in more detail when I get to the executive director report, but quite a few of us will be in DC next week for the National League of Cities conference. So I'll press a pin, I'll put a pin in that, and I'll come back to the executive director report, because we also, but the question I wanted to ask the board is in addition to the rail safety, if there's anything else that the board would like the league to bring up to the delegation. We were planning to do follow-ups on ARPA and infrastructure funding and but if there's anything else the board wants us to do when we get to the executive director report, feel free to let us know in addition to what you just did.
Andrew Gruber from Wasatch Front Regional Council has a comment on transportation issues. So transportation safety. Andrew, do you want to do that now?
Let me make him. You should be able to talk now, Andrew.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, hey, everybody, and Cam, Mayor Silvestrini, thanks for letting me be mostly fly on the wall in this meeting. On transportation safety, this is a good opportunity for me to just give you an FYI about something, and I will tell you our WFRC leadership, I haven't even had the chance to mention this to you yet because it just came together. 1 week from today, we're going to be hosting at WFRC a roundtable on transportation safety. This has actually come because the administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's our friend Robin Hutchison, is going to be in town and is working with all the federal modal transportation agencies, Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, et cetera. And they want to do a panel discussion about transportation safety. So that's going to be happening next Monday afternoon at WFRC's offices. This coincides with the Safe Streets for All grants that WFRC and MAG and others around the state have received. So a lot of focus at all levels on transportation safety issues. And Cam and Mayor Silvestrini would be happy to share more info about the roundtable as soon as it comes together.
Thanks, Andrew.
Perfect.
Okay, let's,
Okay, Justin, you want to give an update on SB 75?
Yeah, SB 75. So everyone, this is sand and gravel bill, Senator Sandel's bill. The governor has until Thursday to take action on all bills. We put in a letter requesting a veto on this bill. I guess a week and a half ago is what it would have been. We sent in the data that we had put together on that one. Just waiting to hear back from the governor. We expect that we will get a meeting with him in the next couple of days to go discuss why we believe he should veto the bill. So once we get those details, we'll coordinate with a few of you to go have that meeting with him. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, we've got until Thursday for that, and we'll get the meeting. We'll go make our case, and then we'll see where it goes. But have to take any questions on that one. But that's really next steps, and we will have a resolution before the end of the week.
thanks. Okay, you have a video for us?
Yes, so local officials day seems like forever ago because it was 2 months ago, and then legislative time, 2 months is like 2 years. But we did want to, Alicia finished this video and I shared it Saturday morning when I was at the event at Utah State with a bunch of youth council members, and we thought it would be worth sharing with the board. So this could be a resource for you to share with your youth council. So hopefully the technology works to share it, and Nick, I'll turn it to you. Alicia, is there anything you want to say about the video before we press play?
No, I just think it's a great overview for, it's all focusing on the youth councils and from their perspective of local official states. So it's a good recruiting tool as you get new members.
Well, and now when they click share sound.
Oh, no.
Pretty loud when you were testing it. Maybe it'll just carry through.
All right, we'll give it a try.
Yeah, Kate was here for the run through, so she can vouch that it worked at one point.
Also, I totally thought this meeting started at 9. Just keep her on time.
If it makes you feel better, so did I. I was just upstairs though.
Well, apologies, the sound does not work for those online.
Well, just if it doesn't work, then maybe just send the link out.
Yeah, I'll send the link out anyway.
Okay. Great.
Put that on my calendar.
So thanks to Alicia for that video. And the last time the board met was on local officials day. So it's a nice reminder of the largest event that happens during the legislative session, not just for the league, but like the amount of people we have in that ballroom is the largest of any organization during the session. And we always believe that the youth councils are our secret weapon to engage with legislators that day. So thank you for your participation in local officials day. And we're already laying the groundwork for next year. And I made the pitch to the youth councils on Saturday to make sure that they join us for local officials day as well. So hopefully that'll be a tool to help you as you're recruiting members to your youth council.
Can I do a quick poll and see how many youth city council members cities have? I don't have a context of how many kids are on those councils.
Oh, do you want numbers?
I just want a quantity, like general quantity.
We're at 12 right
I think we're at 12 too. We're at 20
We're about 22.
and a little bit bigger than that. They don't all actively participate and then they kind of, a few of them, we have a little teeny bit of attrition, not much, but we've got a little bit.
We have 54 and I don't know how to do this. Like, I like
It's impressive.
so that I'm trying to figure out context, because to me, for a little tiny town of 12,000, I'm like,
That's amazing.
I don't know how to fund that, but I thought, well, maybe this is normal. Apparently, it's great.
It's awesome.
They carry off all the, their child.
We vary between 30 and
It's fantastic.
Councilmember,
we have between 30 and 50.
we'll have Angela and Katie send you the registration numbers from LLC, and it's broken down by city, so then you can.
Oh,
you
that'd
can
be rad.
see-
But we only get a few that come to that because they
Yeah.
do have to miss school. We work with the
Yeah.
school district to make sure it was an excused day for the
Yeah.
event every year. For all of the communities in our school district, any of the youth council kids who come. But still, we only get a handful.
I think we all have fun, like the officers for that event. So I think we had like 6, but this year I thought we were gonna cap at 30 and I don't know what. Anyway, okay, I digress. Thanks for that.
Yep, well done.
A bit overwhelmed with it, in a good way, I suppose.
Is that your assignment?
Assignment? Is that your council assignment? To
No.
oversee the youth council? No.
No.
And
I'm public safety, which is, whole other.
well, Councilmember, there's also some feedback in the chat room, so we'll make sure you get that as well.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it really is exciting when we talk to other state leagues. We have some of the most vibrant
Thank you, Mayor.
Monson, we have some of the most vibrant youth councils anywhere in the country. So it's really exciting.
Cool, thank you.
Speaking of January, we told you in January that we were piggybacking on a survey to get questions in the field to the general public about housing and growth. And Councilmember McKay, I mentioned this to Senator McKay that we were piggybacking on his survey around the state flag. And so even though the local officials day video didn't reference the state flag, it was neat to start the session with Senator McKay talking about the state flag and then end the session with the state flag. And he gave me a little state flag upstairs that's on my desk. So you'll need to tell him that since he was mad at me about a couple other bills. But
I know.
How did he do that? Playing baseball with my son. He's a coach in the very first practice. He.
It's so bad. If you haven't seen it, you gotta see it.
You can tell us the truth.
Really feel about the state flag. Other people having.
But we got those survey results back shortly after our January board meeting. To date, only the league officers and the governor's office and a few key people at the Capitol saw them, but we wanted to share them with you. So Molly, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were able to go into the field, as was mentioned, the state flag, study. And what we were really trying to understand is we kind of knew how we were approaching the conversations around growth and development through city perspectives and through league principles, but we wanted to understand where that could kind of beneficially intersect with public opinion as well, to figure out, if necessary, could we deploy the public on our side for some of this? And so as Cam mentioned, this was really helpful for us, and also to understand, like, are we way off on something, right? Like, is the public actually way more comfortable with like a narrow road width than we were anticipating? So we used this research in our negotiations and also presented it to the governor's office to try to kind of bolster some of our negotiations. And I think the data we got back was really interesting. I don't think it was necessarily surprising to us, and especially probably to you, since you're so embedded within your communities. But when we went through, I can kind of go through our top findings. When we asked who do you trust the most to plan for growth in your communities, city government far and away was the #1 choice. That came in with 62% of the vote. The next closest was Governor Cox with 15%. So a pretty sizable spread there. 94% of Utahns value the ability to influence zoning and development decisions in their community. When asked what are the potential actions that Utahns believe would improve the affordability of housing in their communities, a lot of the policies that we had been talking about and negotiating into some of these bills came through. So building more single family housing on smaller lots, increasing development around mass transit, which we've seen with station area plans, standardizing the process for housing developments to be approved from one city to the next, which we saw with the subdivision plans, building more owner occupied multifamily housing, and allowing the state to find cities that don't meet certain affordable housing plan benchmarks, or as we kind of finesse that through the session, assess a fee rather than kind of levy a fine.
Molly, were there other options on this question? Because
There were.
Does not equal 100, doesn't it?
honestly, if you're, the highest is
Yeah,
12%,
so
that
this
doesn't,
was actually
it's not resounding.
one question that we were disappointed with from the way it was implemented. So we had created kind of a menu list of items with the intention being click all that apply to see, how much of everything, and Y2 put it in the field is pick one. And so it doesn't add up, like this doesn't add up to 100. They're all really low because fundamentally at the end of the day, participants could only pick one from a list of like 20 items we put forward. So that's a great question. Good to clarify. But it was also really helpful for us though to see that, even though it wasn't a super illustrative question, it was still the things that did rise to the top were the policies that we were negotiating on this session and the things that we were proactively bringing to the table for negotiation. Are there any other questions on that one? Okay.
The one thing I'll add, Molly, is we have an annual contract with Y2. And so I anticipate we'll ask a similar question again and make sure we get the methodology correct. Because it wasn't, this question was not nearly as illuminating as we had hoped it to be, but we wanted you to see all the questions that we asked, and then we can continue the conversation in future surveys.
So moving on to short-term rentals, 65% of Utahns oppose the state requiring their city to allow more STRs in their communities. 79% oppose the state requiring cities to allow new housing units to be built anywhere in the city, regardless of planning and zoning. And then 84% of Utahns oppose the state requiring to approve housing units without subjecting the proposed housing units, housing developments or constructed plans to plan review and inspections. That was something that we kind of saw the PRC pushing, of really streamlining the approval process. And then when we got to road widths, which turned out to be a big battle that we came out, ahead on, 67% of Utahns didn't want the state to limit the maximum width of residential roads to maximize the land available for development. And 77% of Utahns wanted new residential roads that were wide enough to accommodate street parking, bi-directional traffic, and emergency vehicle access, which is ultimately what we got with the 32-foot road width. And I guess the final thing I'll add is Cam mentioned we have an ongoing contract with Y2. We'll probably put some of these questions out in the field again, but if there's anything that you're thinking of that is a good intersection with public opinion and local policy that we could be asking, please let me know. We're always looking for good research to be done.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but when we roll out the guiding our growth engagement it'd be interesting to get some survey questions around that issue, and particularly whether people understand some of the trade-offs.
Well, and Mayor, I think you highlight one of the tricky things here is, and this is part of what we'll do is we're finding going forward is some of these become such technical, term of art questions that one of the things we were trying to figure out is, do people not only care, but even know, when we ask this question, what we're talking about? And so getting those terms right without it turning into a leading question gets tricky. So that's something we'll continue to refine, and is if you have thoughts on what that looks like going forward, that will matter. Because we don't want to, the road width one is a good one to look at this. You've got to be careful to ask the question in a way that doesn't basically say, do you want roads that allow someone to get to your house in case there's a fire? Because obviously we were going to say yes, but that's not really the discussion we're having. We're talking about what is the width that actually will allow that. And so we've got to ask the questions in such a way that don't become leading or make people distrust the data coming out of it. And that's going to be one of the things we're going to have to figure out as we're going through that going forward.
Versus the other thing I'll add is Alicia actually had a couple of social media campaigns that she was building based on this data in case we needed it as part of the negotiations. And ultimately, the negotiations resulted in a good outcome for us, that we didn't need to engage the public on a couple of those points. But just so people are aware of how we were planning to use those data points and how we still will use them going forward, depending on what unfolds this year. Now we want to take the next about 10 minutes and just frame from our perspective as staff what happened over the last couple of months, and then reserve the bulk of the time in this section of the agenda for you to give us feedback based on those board questions below. So Justin, you want to start on the score for?
I do, yeah. So talking about first off, year-round legislature. This isn't probably news to everybody, but the legislature is not a part-time gig. It technically is, but there's things going all year round. And as we've mentioned before, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, the UEOC, really has changed the game. They're trying very hard to take big ticket, big picture, big idea items, work those through the interim, and then turn around bills once we get to the legislative session. And that's really operating outside of the regular interim, the regular interim committees that we watch and we deal with normally. So we really are, dealing with the year-round legislature. And what's been even different this year from previous years is within a week of the session ending, we already had committee chairs, legislative staff, and others reaching out and asking us what things you want to look at during this next interim. There was really no downtime at all before they started asking what's next. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we're just going straight into it. There's not going to be a whole lot of downtime at all. There's not a lot of time to figure out even what we just did. We're going straight into what's happening. So while we're doing the wrap up, we're already looking forward to what's coming up and trying to figure out where we want to put our time and effort. And then we need help, obviously help prioritizing what are the things that are going to matter most to us over this next year. So we're already going. Before we even wrap up 2023, we're already talking about 2024. That's already coming up. The message that worked really well this last legislative session, and so many of you did such a great job sharing this, was the state of Utah had a surplus, but cities don't. That resonated really well with our legislators. We went from, and Molly, you can talk about this a little bit, but we were tracking all the bills and all the fiscal impacts that came from all the different bills out there. And what are our numbers? Look like the number of bills that could have impacted us.
Yeah, so from all the negative kind of fiscal impacts that were introduced, whether it was like revenue diversion, unfunded mandates, anything like that, from everything in total, we were looking at about $120 million in ongoing negative fiscal impacts of the proposed legislation. A couple of the big ones were like the original version of the Wilcox's SRO bill, Matt Wynn's public safety bill, Kira Berkland's retirement bills, to name a few that were really going to have a hefty impact on cities. At the end of the day, and this is all just per like LFA's official estimate, so that's also a very conservative estimate because they really love to put no direct measurable cost on things that really have quite a cost. But at the end of the day, by the end of the session, we wound up with about $13.2 million in a loss. And of that, about 9 million for this first year is the HB 301 Representative Schultz gas tax bill, which delays, kind of drops the rate for gas tax and extends the timeline out for hitting the cap, but it also raises the cap. And so a big chunk of kind of our loss this year is actually going to be a lot of new revenue in about 3 years moving forward. So we came out pretty well.
The other thing that we don't talk about because none of these bills got any traction, but you know, there was a movement among some to limit our ability to assess property taxes to local governments, and that those efforts, I think we were successful in squashing them to that idea that, you know, the property tax increases that we saw last year, which maybe caused concern in the legislature, were motivated by the wage war and police salaries that we had by and large, and so, you know, don't mess with our ability to be flexible about that, and that is a big win because that could have been devastating.
So one, I think, Mayor, yeah, it's one of the hard things, and we've never quite figured out how to, I think, show this effectively. So we'll bring it up here a little bit. Is there are a lot of bills that never see the light of day, or even ideas that never see the light of day, and that's because of work that's done in the background, either from staff or from our extended family discussions, where they never do come out, and it's hard to track those wins because it's hard to say a bill failed when it never even showed up in the first place. But there were certainly those kind of things, and I think the retirement is a good one, where that was a huge fiscal impact. We have a lot of discussions about that. But ultimately, it never even made it out of the House Rules Committee, so never got a single hearing anywhere. And that's a big win. So that message resonated. It worked well, and that's not that I think that the state's going to have the same. We've got a big surplus discussion going forward in the next few years, but that was a good win, and that was a good message that was delivered consistently from our members to legislators, and that one did resonate. So well done to everyone there.
The other key message that we were working through the session was partner with local governments to plan for growth, so partnership rather than preemption. To Justin's point about bills that we were fighting off behind the scenes, you know, see item B in the memo references lots of ideas that we saw in print, but many of which never made it into final bill form because we were pushing back behind the scenes, and that was everything from preempting local planning and zoning of cities to property tax caps and other things. There was ultimately a bill about attorney's fees that we were able to fight off pursuing local governments. The initial version of SB 174 would have weaponized motor fuel tax revenue, but in that preemption of local planning and zoning, there were multiple efforts to do so that we successfully fought off for cities. The way we're trying to frame it this spring as we meet with the membership is that we were successful at our core objective of respecting the role of cities in a general sense. But part of the reason we were successful is that the state also expects more of cities. So they ultimately respected the role of Provo and West Jordan and Naples, but they're expecting more. And you're seeing that with some of the bills we've negotiated the last few years, that it still preserves that local ability of elected officials to plan your communities, but the expectations are higher because of the growth pressures. I'll give an example of this. I presented a couple of times to the House Republican caucus about the trio of housing bills. The last time I presented on it was the last week of the session. After Representative White, Councilmember Egbert, Representative White was a champion on integrity of process, and we'll come back to how we want to express appreciation to him afterward. Ditto with Senator Fillmore. But I was co-presenting with Representative White to all of his colleagues on SB 174, took questions, and that's a closed caucus. For those who don't know what I mean when I say present to the caucus, essentially almost every day in the final days of the session, the House Republicans and the House Republicans and the House Democrats have caucus meetings, ditto in the Senate. So often those discussions at the House Republican caucus or the Senate Republican caucus drives the final outcome on policy. So then they're closed caucuses. So you're only, as the lobbyists, we're only invited in. We can't just go sit in. So I was invited several times this session to present on bills. And the last one was with SB 174, the subdivisions bill. And I co-presented it with Representative White. And then Speaker Wilson stood up and said, I want my colleagues to know, I think this is the most impactful land use bill of my career up here. I appreciate the League of Cities and Towns for being a partner in working on this bill. And then he told his colleagues, like, we need to step up and provide resources. So I met with Cam to secure technical assistance money to help communities implement these bills. And to his credit, he did. We got $4 million, will go through the Department of Workforce Services, but $4 million to help on technical assistance for these housing bills specifically. That's in addition to the technical assistance money we got last year for the station area plans, which was $5 million. So I bring that up because I think it does reflect the partnership in a really meaningful way.
I want to say, so, there's a difference in how the league has approached its role in lobbying the legislature in the last year or two anyway, that is different. We actually, through listening to our critics and others through the ULCT process and the CHOP committee process, came up with that subdivision reform as a means to say, this is something that we can give that will standardize the procedure. It addresses the things that we're hearing about the delay and speed, about different procedures in different cities being confusing and troublesome, and also, to some extent, the public clamor gets in the way too much. So we actually came up with a proposal and advocated for that proposal on the subdivision bill, which is a change for us. But the thing that was good is we were able to, I think, I'll say the word sell it. We were able to sell it to the governor's office and to leadership on House and Senate with the idea that we were coming forward with a proactive proposal. Here's what we're offering up to be constructive. And it enabled us actually by doing that, it enabled us to fight off a lot of these other bad ideas that we have been fighting through that whole process, through the whole interim session, like taking the gas tax away from cities that weren't compliant with moderate income housing and a bunch of other things like that. So, I mean, I don't want to continue to erode. To some extent, it seems like we're always fighting that kind of a battle, but I do think it makes a huge difference when we're at the table offering actual proactive proposals rather than just saying no to everything. That made a difference with the speaker, with the president of the Senate, with Representative Schultz, and with the governor's office, based upon conversations that we had with them, where they acknowledged, and we were able to actually go in and say, look, do you realize how hard this is for us to do with our membership? We're offering this up as a way to try to solve the state's problem in a way that's good policy and makes sense, as opposed to these other ideas which are terrible policy and don't make sense. So I think that's actually a credit to our organization that we've been able to think that way and to collaborate. And I also want to say, I know you're going to get to this later, but the other thing that we had going for us this session is we had Senator Lincoln Fillmore and Representative Stephen White, who recognized those compromises that we were making, who held true to some integrity of the process, okay? And that also, in the end of the day, we're able to get rid of a bunch of things that kind of sneaked in at the last minute that would have bombed these bills, blown them up for us. But these guys both worked really hard. And in spite of the fact that we heard like Senator Fillmore come to the annual meeting last year and talk about what he was going to do, and we were all like thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be hard. He didn't behave that way during the session. He actually was an honest broker for all this stuff, and really have to appreciate those two guys.
I agree. And Carson, can you take 1 minute? Like item E here is about the other state leagues. Can you take just 1 minute and share what we've heard from other leagues over the last few weeks?
There was an article in like the New York Times yesterday or something like that talked about how states around the country were hammering their cities over housing policy. We were noticeably absent from that list, but we were
in the Bloomberg article that went out, but in a positive way. Yeah. So Carson, can you just take 1 minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has kind of been a multi-year effort, but this past fall, after trying to build a network of other state league staff, we're dealing with the same things, same tactics, even some of the same exact bills.
around the country, we tried to organize a more cohesive group. We met a few times over Zoom for the session to try to coordinate. I think that's still an ongoing effort. At the National League of Cities event, we'll be trying to catch as many of the league staff as we can to try to coordinate this, because at every single league staff conference I've been to, every single legislative session, it all comes back to housing. That's the thing that everybody's seeing. It might be the, for example, we talked about the HB 1003. That was the final version of HB 98 that prohibited design standards, and that's come up in a whole bunch of other states. I think Utah was one of the first, maybe Arizona was the very first, but we've seen that playing out over and over again. We hear more and more draconian things from our colleagues around the country each year about they're turning to us to ask, how are you guys doing this? Because they're just seeing a hard line from their legislators. They're just being preempted last minute, and we're really excited about this model. And we're going to try to keep building it throughout the year.
And what I'll add to that is that Carson has done tremendous work trying to build relationships with other state league staff. I've been doing similar on the executive director level, and in just the last month, I've had conversations with the league directors in New York, Arizona, Colorado, California, and no, not Montana yet. Anyway, there have been 5 state leagues who I've talked to their directors about what we've done the last 2 sessions and what they can learn from it one way or the other. In fact, one of those state league directors told me that he was in a meeting with his Speaker of the House. Speaker of the House said, well, Florida was the other one. Speaker of the House said, we're preempting cities on housing and land use. That director said, no, they had a battle. And another legislator in the room said, well, state league director, have you talked to Utah? Because my understanding is in Utah, they've been able to figure out a way that everybody's come to the table on big issues. So that day he gave me a call. It was the last week of the session. So I said, I can give you more details. You're right. But he said, help me understand what you guys are doing. And again, we'll be doing a lot of this outreach next week at the National League of Cities. So thank you for the collaborative effort here, because a lot of these ideas we talk about here at the board meeting before, make sure we're all on the same page before we engage in that way. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. The other big takeaway in this theme is that in my career at the league, this past session was the second highest amount of new transportation money for cities specifically in my career. So I don't think you'll ever have another year like 2015, but this was the second highest amount. And to do it in a year when the state had record surpluses, it was the year of the tax cut, and we were able to successfully get significant money for local government infrastructure, I think is extraordinary. If the last theme was that we delivered on the rural resources, like with the local administrative advisor and other things, and even having the delayed effective dates for rural Utah and technical assistance for rural Utah. So Nick, if you'll go down.
Cameron, this is Carrie Malkovich. I just had a question back on 2. I raised my hand, but I guess you can't see it on there. But
Okay.
Back to number 2, I wanted to ask Molly, are we putting together some sort of white paper to give to the legislature that talks about that 120 million nearly, of introduced bills, although all of them did not come out? I think that's a significant number for them to keep in their head during the interim. They only, know the fiscal note of their own bill usually. And collectively, I think that's very powerful, although you negotiated it down to the 13.2, just the initial ask of 120 is really significant for us to be able to go through this interim as we're looking at the same topics over again, it looks like, for next session. The ability to say, yes, they didn't all pass, but be mindful of this.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Councilmember. Thank you. What we did with this list was I was kind of updating it every single week, and we were sharing it with the governor's team, with House leadership and with Senate leadership, of essentially saying your point exactly. Like, we recognize that everyone is running their own individual bill and that the right hand doesn't really know what the left hand is doing. But you need to understand that if you pass all these bills, it will be devastating for local government. And you will be looking at pretty, if you were upset about the property tax increases last year, we're going to be forced to kind of find new ways to generate revenue to pay for all of this. And so that was a message that we carried through consistently with just about everyone we spoke with throughout the session. And I don't think it would hurt to kind of follow up with them and say, you know, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
A holistic approach.
Well, I know that I usually send a letter of thank you to my own reps to say thank you for working with us as local governments. We really appreciate, and I will say off some of the names of some of the bills or the topics in general, but this would be a good thing for us individually to be able to send with such a letter. Just so that they recognize the cities that live in their districts are aware of this cost as well. Just a thought.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember. And in just a moment, we're going to finish our framing and then set up for this, that exact type of conversation of what you thought went well, where we can improve, and then pivot to priorities for the interim. So let me just wrap here on the transportation piece. We didn't broadcast these aggregate numbers during the session. Instead, we were broadcasting just the dedicated money for cities. But you can see in the aggregate, $44 million of every county were to impose SB 260. That's how much would be dedicated for cities and towns, assuming that the cities are compliant with moderate income housing plans. You have the SB 175 number for rural Utah, and then the SB 185 with the road usage charge money. We are now the first state in the country to have cities and towns participating in a road usage charge program going forward. So as the road usage charge becomes the supplement to the motor fuel tax, we will get a dedicated portion of that revenue based on the gas tax formula. So that's a huge under the radar victory, but come 2030, when the road usage charge program is fully implemented, we will directly benefit from it. And then House Bill 301, Molly mentioned that the changes to the motor fuel tax will be a net benefit and a net positive for cities and towns. We also recognize that some of you and some of our members are already getting beaten up because of the passage of these bills, particularly SB 260. So we will be meeting with the other stakeholders to work on messaging. We don't anticipate the majority of counties to impose the fifth this year. In fact, I would anticipate only a handful would impose the fifth this year. But when that happens, we'll be working with the MPOs and the AOGs and other stakeholders on the general messaging. So similar to what we did with Prop 1 a few years ago, we're all singing off the same sheet of music as you're having these conversations with the general public about why this is a necessary tool. But the biggest takeaway for us as a league is, had we not stepped in on the fifth, in a conversation that actually started in my office last July about preserving the fifth and modifying it, the fifth would have expired, and there would not have been dedicated money for cities in it. And good luck ever getting the legislature to authorize another sales tax levy for local government in the near term future. In fact, Andrew Gruber and I, and part of the reason I invited him to be at the board meeting here, Andrew and I were in a meeting with legislative leadership in the House last week of the session, where they basically said to us, you don't have the votes over here, we're not running the bill. And I leaned forward to that legislator and said, we will have the votes. He said, we'll prove it, because last week's session, right now, we don't, you don't have the votes. And I think we should just hold this bill. And in fact, at one point, the suggestion was made, tell the counties to impose the bill and then put the money in a lockbox, and we'll come back and change the formula next year. To which we said, we all know what will happen. This tax will just expire. And I said, we'll get you the votes. Give us a few hours, we'll get you the votes. And my staff remembers exactly where they were, because I was texting them furiously while I'm having the conversation with the legislator. Give me a whip count right now so I can show him that we'll get the votes. And then we ended up securing more than 50 votes.
And I want to say that, I mean, in terms of the lobbying effort, I have never seen one like that before, where there were like about 12 lobbyists out calling people out, talking to them, talking them into speaking in the caucus, giving them talking points about what they could talk about in the caucus. It was a pretty impressive effort.
Yeah, it was an all hands on deck, because again, we weren't going to get another opportunity like this with the fifth. And again, the initial conversation modifying the fifth happened upstairs last July. But Nick, if you'll go down to this board motion table, what we did last week is we went back through all the motions that you made as a board, all the discussion that you had in the last now 8 months. So we could come back to you and say, in September, you told us that you endorsed this the local administrative advisor program. Boom, got it funded. You can see everything on the homelessness piece. You can see everything on the housing piece. At one point, I had each motion word for word, and Alicia told me I needed to summarize them to make it more user friendly, but you get the point. On all of these key topics, you gave us direction, we delivered on that direction, including the fifth, the housing bills we've already talked about, and a variety of other things. The only two things that were not funded that we discussed at the board level was the state infrastructure bank, which will come back next year, and the zero fare transit, which we discussed and endorsed with caveats. And ultimately, the legislature wasn't interested, and we decided early that we were going to focus our political capital elsewhere. Nick, if you go down to the pieces in bold, in addition to you as a board, we also survey the LPC. We use Slido during the session. But for those in the room, you can see this lovely color-coded chart. So when we ask the LPC here you go. When you ask the LPC for survey result or to fill out surveys, we've done this the last 2 summers. We now have 77 policy outcomes that we've surveyed the league membership on. And color coding is whether it's very comfortable, somewhat concerning, very concerning, and then it's broken down by caucus. So we can see, do our big cities view something differently than the resort communities? And then where's their overlap or where's the disconnect? Of those 77 items, of the 30 lowest scoring outcomes, only 2 in the last 2 years have resulted in bills. And those were heavily negotiated. We have fought off bills or potential bills from 24 of those lowest scoring 30. But because we knew where the membership was on those issues, that allowed us to understand our sandbox of where to fight or where to negotiate. Likewise, of the 30 highest scoring, we've made progress in bills or appropriations in 18 of them, or 60%. So I mean, you know me, I like lots of words on the screen to tell the story, and Alicia's still trying to help me figure out how to tell this in a more user-friendly way. But I think it's important for you as a board to understand all the feedback we ask for, how we're using it behind the scenes, and how we're using it to accomplish the direction that you give us. And ultimately, we feel like we delivered this session based on the direction you as a board gave us, and in general that the membership gave us. I'm going to pause there because I said we're going to take 10 minutes for framing, that ended up going for a little over 20. But we want to take the next 30 minutes and give you as a board a chance to give us feedback of what you thought went well or what can be improved. So Justin, you want to set those questions up, both retrospective and prospective?
Yeah, so to start off with, these are big, broad questions, so you can give big, broad answers, or you can give really specific answers. I'll take either. And I say, and you can answer any one of these questions. I'm going to ask a big multi-part question, so then go for it. So from your perspective, what went well during the legislative sessions last year? 2, what can we improve on based on what happened? Oh, last year, like 2 weeks ago. My mind's already gone to 2024. So what went well during the 2023 legislative session? What can we improve on that happened during the 2022 session? And then specifically, what worked, what didn't work for LPC, or other engagement tells, so nightly email, action alerts, any of that. So what went well during session, what can we improve on? Broad question. Happy to hear any feedback.
Can I jump in with a thought, just going back to the information you just shared?
Mm-hmm.
I love, and I think it is reasonably concise to be able to read, these were the policy concerns. This is what came up. These are what we fought. This is what we got passed, whatever, based on these LPC results, based on the surveys, based on the input of this board. It's not the sexy stuff that you take to a conference right before a keynote speaker, but I hope that the opportunity at a meeting that most of the membership will be attending, not one that they may choose to, go here or there or whatever, but somewhere, I hope this information is shared, because I do think our membership needs to understand that. I think it's so good for us as a board to see this and to know, to have the metrics and to be able to see it. I think our membership needs to understand that. So I think it would be very valuable to be able to share that with the membership. Also, in addition to when Mayor Silvestrini said you know, the subdivisions really came forward as a proactive approach from this organization. Fifth was the same way, same thing. Finding opportunities like that might be overlooked, that people might not be aware of, and partnering with organizations like Wasatch Front Regional Council and everybody who worked on Fifth together, that mattered. The counties coming together to work on that. Being proactive like that, I'm a big fan of that. And so that's one thing I think really worked, is being proactive about some solutions that the legislature is looking for solutions on that can benefit us, or things they may not even be aware or on the radar, but that we know are coming up that can be beneficial for us, for cities, for counties. Being proactive about, hey, here's a solution we want to bring to the table. I think we did better at that this year than maybe I've ever seen. And I thought that was very successful.
I'm gonna tag on what Mayor Anderson was talking about, the fifth, the 260. I mean, that wasn't even a slam dunk. It was sketchy right away to the end. If the league and Wasatch Front Regional Council wasn't involved in that in the first place, there is no way it would have gone through. And we probably wouldn't even know about it until after it was all said and done, that it wasn't there anymore. And we would just, so the education purposes that happen, not only by the text messages, but at the LPCs when we get the education. So when that does come up, we have the information ready to move forward on short notice.
One of the things I enjoyed being at the Capitol, in the trenches with lead staff every day, was the Slido results. And I thought the Slido was very interesting in the LPC meetings, but I don't think everyone got to see exactly how granular you could have Slido go, and then how that was something you could take to legislators and take into negotiations. And because it was playing out in real time, there probably wasn't time to dive all the way into that, but it might be interesting in a breakout or something at one of the upcoming conferences to explain the data and how seriously we ought to take those Slido polls when we're doing them. Like I was thinking about like road widths, in particular when you guys were, breaking down who had responded and what size of cities, and I got to see exactly how you guys were breaking that down and using it. But I don't think most people were able to see that even in this group.
I think that was a good point, because we do collect a lot of data, and we share some of it back, but we don't definitely have time to show all of them back.
I don't
So
think people
that's
understand
smart.
how cool a tool it really is. Like people who answer flippantly about like where they're from, or
Yeah, we
Like,
were really happy with
like-
Slido this last year.
One of the things I thought that worked out well, I mean, I don't actually know how many people saw this, but I think a number of them did on the roadwood thing. Thanks to Spanish for the work that they did on this, but putting together a video to show what roadwood meant in terms of parked cars and emergency vehicles or snowplows. I thought that was just a totally great demonstration of the problem, and may have helped us win on that in terms of showing what the real impact was of a narrow road width. And so to the extent that we can use things like that, where we come up with a visual aid or something like that, I don't know if you can always do that on things, but that kind of thing was super effective.
It felt to me like the quantity of things staff was dealing with, and then we were bouncing around. I mean, we were at a Utah County caucus, not a caucus, but an electeds meeting. Mayor Kafusi was there, a few others. And we had one of the, I don't remember who it was, maybe you remember, one of our reps said one of the biggest problems with the league is that you don't give CAM enough authority to respond in a timely manner. You guys got to fix that, because otherwise the ship has sailed before you guys even act on it. And I felt things moved so fast and so well, especially considering the circumstance. So I don't know how valid that feedback was, but I do have a concern if we see another session as intense as this is, and we know we had some staff change, that like if we see that again, what do we need to do operationally to make sure staff has the power, the communication? Is there anything we can do outside of this session to streamline communication for the future to make this easier? I mean, I was blown away with how effective the league was this session. It was incredible. and it was exciting and great, but I do have some concerns about the size of the organization, our ability to flex. So whether it's using tools like Slido or something else, I'd love to noodle on that some more.
So I think, I mean, this may be a reflection of some of those members not being members of the board or with officers, because I mean, that's during the session,
It was a legislator.
our staff is constantly conferring with officers. We have all kinds of pop-up meetings. We have a weekly meeting with the governor's office, a weekly meeting just with the officers, that's a call, and then impromptu meetings as necessary when stuff comes up. So we are working to give them direction. It's just a lot of it's behind the scenes because it has to be. There isn't time to call together the LPC, and even that is still once a week, right? You know, and so we do a good job of that. I think it's just may not be seen.
Sometimes it's a strategic play. I mean, you see
Oh,
this,
it's snarky, the context.
you see
is
this
a
play
little
out all the time in the Capitol. I mean, if I'm working on a bill for a client and it's going my way, then I'm always telling the legislature, no, we can't stop and wait for this other group to go back and check with their board. That's a stall tactic on their part.
Yep.
Unless, of course, I'm on the other side and then it's like, God, I need to ask. So, I'm confident that Cam and the others know when, whether, what they have in their back pocket for direction and when they don't, and when they're working to hit pause on an issue for any number of tactical reasons or truly to gather feedback.
One of the things I think we can hopefully do better, or I'm not sure exactly how to do this, and it is somewhat of a delicate conversation to have in a way too, but we had a number of bills where we thought we were making great progress, and then things popped up into them that were amendments or things that totally trashed our ability to support the bill. And then the other thing we had with the gravel pit tax adjustment thing is we had legislation passed when most of the bodies did not appreciate the impact on local governments. And, it's one thing I appreciate the laudable goal of giving gravel pit cities more tax revenue or more a way to offset the increased destruction of their roads from all those trucks hauling. But I don't think that legislators realized what the impacts were on other municipalities of that kind of bill. And I just wish there was a way for us to try to convey a message that sometimes these last minute things that people want to throw in for their own reasons can really derail good legislation. I mean, on the housing bill, that we worked so hard on getting consensus and all that stuff, and then to have somebody's pet project get thrown in the last minute and upset it. I don't know if there's a way to educate about that or not, and maybe it is just part of the process. And I don't want to offend the people that were trying to get things done that they thought were laudable, but that kind of monkey business, if you will, is super harmful to the process and our ability to cooperate. I mean, that we had conversations with them. It's like, look, we have worked so hard to collaborate on this, and now this is what we're going to end up with, and we have to go back to our membership and tell them this is what we were supporting. It's like, come on.
Mayor, we've got a few hands on, 3 hands up.
So I see Carrie Malkovich is the first one, and then Gary Hill. So.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I really appreciate all the communication. I agree with Kate. The Slido was amazing. Once everybody got the hang of it, excuse me, took a little while for people to understand it, but I really thought that we got some good information from that. The morning calls, the weekly LPC meetings, the nightly emails, the action alerts, all of that is amazing. And I have people from other states that call me and saying, how do you guys engage? And all of those things really are helpful. I had a few comments from individual cities who might not understand ULCT or legislative speak, that would sometimes get lost in the message as it was sent out, because we're all so engaged in it that it picks up really fast. But others kind of have they're still trying to process what we're saying, why we've already moved on. So I was wondering if there was any way we can have simple graphics or like that video from Spanish Fork that we can, you know, showcase those more complex issues in a kind of, I'm not going to say dumbed down way, but a simplified way, just to give them an overall concept. Whether it's in the packet or at the beginning of or during the LPC meetings or something that just lets their brain catch up a little bit quicker to the fast pace of legislative session and what we're actually talking about. That's my comment.
Thanks, Gary. Gary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I wanted to highlight maybe a best practice and a really good thing that Justin did just before the lid bill dropped, or did, or whatever we wanted to refer to it as. You know, when we were in negotiations and things were in flux, many of us really didn't know what to tell our legislators if this was something that we should support or not support. And we weren't quite ready to call out the league army. We have a weekly meeting with league staff and city managers to coordinate messages and to talk technical issues. And at that meeting, Justin gave us what I would call a pre-league army marching orders. It was basically, let your legislators know that a bill is likely to drop in the next couple of days that will grant taxing authority to developers. It was that simple. And so many of us were able to give that heads up to our legislators. And so when it dropped 24 hours later, they were primed. And that was huge. That was, I don't know if there's a way that with some of these complicated bills that we can think about sort of the pre-marching order talking points or a pre-message that we can give our folks so that they're sort of standing by. But it was great, Justin. Appreciated that.
Thanks, Gary. I can't see if there's another hand up or not. Is there another one?
No.
Okay.
So I follow up, is there anything specific from LPC? LPC is a whirlwind of a meeting that we do once a week, hour and a half, and we never get through quite everything we want. Well, no, we always get through everything we need to, but we don't necessarily always get through everything we want to in the depth we want to. Is there anything specifically there from messaging, timing, prioritizing? Just any thoughts about how we approach that meeting?
And let me, one other piece of context, again, comparing to other states. Whenever I tell other state league directors that we hold a policy committee during the session where we bring a couple hundred people together in person and remotely, often the response back is seriously, because I've had several state leagues who said, we don't want our cities that involved during the session because it's just too hard to manage. And my response is like, we didn't do that. Like that is the strength of the league is the membership. Like we didn't do that, we would lose our influence at the Capitol. So we're unique around the country in how we try to use the LPC and empower cities that way. So yeah, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Justin's question.
I did love, I think it was our last LPC where we were taking assignments on.
Oh, did though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one of those great moments of having everybody coordinate really quickly to make sure those assignments went out. And sometimes you see that happen on an email string, you know, for a bill on committee or on the floor, but that was I thought a really great moment for all of the LPC.
Me too, that sense of accountability that it created, that we're accountable to one another to support. It wasn't just like the lead staff. And even the conversation was 499, right? About that, there just was some really powerful moments. If you can fix the parking issue, that'd be cool. But I'm pretty sure you guys can do a lot of stuff, but that's probably
In 3 years, parking will be awesome.
that's right. It'll be awesome. We'll hang on to that. I'll run again. Just
In 3 years.
But-
Hold on to that hope.
I'll believe it when I see it.
There's so much going on. I don't know how you could do anything better to achieve as much as you do in that short time. It is nuts. But I think the energy around that is part of the excitement of it.
Well, I think one of the things that was good that we've done the last 2 years is to have, you know, either before or after LPC to have these little caucuses come, you know, whether it was, we did it last year, Salt Lake County cities about the what was that, came up 404?
440.
440. You know, and then we did it this year on one bus, and also on travel pits and things like that. So I think those meetings, you're right, Jessica, they bring, there's vibrant discussion, and I think it's actually super useful for officers and staff to hear from members about what their thoughts are on that stuff.
For parking though, the bike rack is over on the southeast part and plenty of room
You
there.
know what, from Mapleton, it's lower up. I'm not.
Just have to do, like, you know, the bird doesn't ride you by.
Like 6 of 7 LPCs were like during a major snowstorm too.
Yeah, that cooperated really well with last year. It was helpful.
And yet we still had phenomenal attendance.
So Andrew Gruber said you wanted to say something, I think, so.
Thanks, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to briefly echo my compliments for the effectiveness of the league staff and overall league army. You know, I've now at the point that I've been doing this for a little while, and this session really was a remarkable display of organization and engagement and ultimately effectiveness. There is no other lobbying team at the Capitol that has the degree of organization and reach and effectiveness that's comparable to the league. It's really impressive. I also want to emphasize one other area, and that this probably won't surprise you that I'm saying this, but about collaboration. The collaboration that exists between the league and our organization, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and the other MPOs and AOGs in the state is it's a leveraging to increase effectiveness. And it's not just true for other government organizations, although it is also with the counties. You know, Mayor Shepherd knows the relationships with the land use task force and the realtors, the relationships. You know, Cameron and I had multiple meetings with the Salt Lake Chamber and other chambers, and that work in collaboration with other partners to identify shared goals. So it's not just the city and town folks working in isolation, but it's leveraging those relationships towards shared goals, increases the effectiveness. So I want to recognize and continue to emphasize that approach as we go forward. So nice work.
Thank you, Andrew. Other thoughts from the group, online or in person?
Yeah, I just got to tell a quick story because Andrew's on. I went back to New York a week and a half ago, and wherever we go, my kids always bug me or say, I know someone, it doesn't matter where we go. And so my son said, you're going to meet someone you know within like 24 hours. And then we were at the 9/11 memorial, and my son said, when do you think you're going to run into somebody you know? 20 minutes later, I ran into Andrew Gruber. So Andrew and I going to hang out for a minute at 9/11 memorial, which is pretty cool.
And for a moment, we were all really happy to see each other, and then we sort of remembered our.
Remember where we were.
I really missed the little yellow sheets. Back.
The ones that pass into legislature.
Oh.
So I'm glad you actually brought that up, because this is another way that legislatures fundamentally changed in recent years. So in the past, when I started at the league, we'd have mayors and council members come up and we'd say, yeah, we can connect you to your legislator. We'd send in notes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now the only way you're going to get a legislator is if you've got a cell number and they're going to respond to the text.
And they know who you are.
And they know who you are, and they know if they don't respond to it, that you're going to hold them accountable for not responding to it. And that fundamentally changes the outreach, because it's no longer the note that goes in. It's like, oh, there's a mayor here. Maybe I haven't met the mayor, but I don't want to stand up to the mayor. Now it's, you've got to have the cell number, and they get inundated with text messages. So are they going to respond to yours? And I think that's going to needs to be part of our training piece. You know, one thing that Justin referenced before, but we'll be driving this home this spring. We tracked 45% more bills this year than last year. 45% more. And they passed more bills than ever before in state history, bigger budget than any time in state history. That's not going to change. That's the trend. And we've got to make sure.
Well, and they passed more bills and they ended 2.5 hours earlier too. So they could have kept going.
And some of the items you see on the list of what's going next year are bills that were in the queue and they just ran out of time and didn't pass. And we've already been told by bill sponsors we're bringing these things back.
Or they stopped because they were really crappy bills and they knew they needed to.
Oh, yeah.
They ran out
The
of
bad
that.
permits.
For now, yeah, but it's all coming back. So anyway,
It's
I
never
think a couple-
stopped them from bringing happy bills again.
so there are several.
And on leadership to know when to be like, oh, it seems kind of like.
Yeah.
So Nick, I see a couple items in the chat. Can you read? Can you read those out?
Well, I do that, follow them up on those texts. There were a couple of legislators that my staff would text them and they would respond. But when I did, I got a call back from them. So if that relationship.
The relationship matters.
It wouldn't have happened.
Yep.
Yes. So and that has to start way before the session starts.
First, we have from Mayor Danes, well done, lead staff. And then from Mayor Monson, I'll read through this. I struggle a little with LPC. I find those meetings empowering and helpful to tackle the tasks, but often feel like many of the hot ticket items don't directly apply to such rural frontier areas. So it's sometimes hard to engage when the majority of it isn't going to directly impact us on the levels that it will alter or change things for the larger urban areas. Then we also have Councilmember Malkovich. What do we think the impact of UEOC on the process or with efficiency?
Before you answer that, let's see what Councilmember Phillips said.
And then Councilmember Phillips said, my greatest concern with the LPC meetings is often hearing what the group is talking about. Need to use microphones better.
You know, my comment on the rural thing, I think that's true because a lot of it is centered right around here. But I think it's also important that if they're participating in the LPC, it needs to be something that is rural and we can communicate that with them and then with us. Since they supported us on those, we are likely to support them on those and make it work together. I think that's important for them to be involved. Good.
I think that's a really good point. And I think we can make sure, because there are certainly things that impact rural more than urban, and we should definitely go out of our way to highlight those as well, so we can get that cross support. I think that's wise.
Speaking of Slido, several brought Slido up here. We've also been talking to staff about pivoting to entirely electronic voting at LPC because we have such a mix of hybrid attendance. Does that give anybody pause? We haven't made a final decision because we're still trying to figure out how to do that, but
It feels like it'd be easier for you guys to count. I mean, the few times where we came to account, the fact that you guys have to, you know, put your hands up. Like if we were all, I mean, I think the challenge is how do you make sure, because sometimes when you're doing Slido, you have some cities who, you know, have a bunch of staff there and maybe it's really great feedback when you're asking, well, what's the road width in your city? And you want to be on the Slido to help give that feedback. But when you come to a motion with an official vote, how will you ensure that the electronic voting is only the designated voters for each city's contingent?
Well, and our hope
It
is
might even be easier to do it that way if you give people a code to get in.
Yeah, and that's what we're thinking. If we could figure out a way, if you're an official LPC voting member, whether you're in the room or remote, we can authenticate you as you're logging into that. So instead of the sign-up sheets, which frankly nobody signs,
until they're told.
until they're told to, when we need them. But yeah, if we could authenticate everybody at the front end and say, yes, you're an LPC voting member, you're in here now, wherever you are, then we could, those votes would just be authenticated right out of the gate.
The advantage of electronic voting, what I presume it's an advantage, because it's kind of also more of a secret ballot. So.
Well,
There are
one other-
advantages to
so-
that.
go ahead.
There's advantages too, because sometimes you want to see what your colleagues are thinking and
Right.
doing and that. So you're right, both ways.
How will you ensure the integrity of the selection audit?
Are those
That's-
to be published?
Carson has been working with me and trying to figure out, it was like, hey, can we buy some LPC voting software? And as we've looked around, Carson chimed in as well.
I thought you were gonna say
We've
about
not-
LPC votes, that's what.
Oh, yeah.
Different conversation.
That's more expensive.
With what we need in order to authenticate, make sure it's only voting members, also have responses in real time so we can move on it. We've yet to find something that exists currently that would check every box. So right now we're looking more into things that exist, but also creating something.
Can do it, but it's.
Somebody could make a ton of money getting that one right.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason I bring the question up is it is a budget issue. And it's not that we need to decide today, but like if over the next few weeks, the board feels like this would be a worthwhile use of funds, then, we may end up having to build something custom. Now, you mentioned, Kate, us walking around like, counting the votes. There is a lot of trust, not just in the room of who signed in, but also online. And when you get heated votes like with House Bill 499 this session, where the initial vote, the first vote didn't get to the 60% threshold. But I had several people who were online who called me afterwards, said, did you get my vote? Did you get to my vote? Well, I'm certain that we did, because Carson was tracking and he had the list of voting members of who had signed in. But there is that kind of ambiguity there that when a city calls and says, hey, I know for the first motion for 499 is just a reminder that was the homelessness bill. And so there were a couple of cities from Utah County who called and said, we voted for that initial motion. And I said, yep, Carson's got the list of who wrote yes in the chat room, that it is a little clunky. And so that was in part what got us thinking, like, is there a way to, knowing how many people we have online and in person, it's usually about evenly split. So there are over 200 people who are participating in these meetings. So how do we make sure that everyone feels good about the integrity of the process? But Mayor Tran, to your point on the public nature of it too, we treat LPC like a public meeting. And so how do we ensure we're still meeting the spirit of the public vote as well? So.
Well, Qualtrics for sure can do it, but I've done something similar. So whether it's authentication or text, you can even text everybody on the spot. It's just pricey, so.
Yeah, we talked about doing a text solution too.
Yeah, and we do, and we're just gearing up for renewal with Qualtrics. So maybe we should touch base and see.
I
what
am
package we can-
an XM certified professional,
Right.
so.
There we go.
I would love to add to our future agenda, and I don't know, if we're probably already planning on this, and this is tangent, but it's part of the questions we're talking about is with this lawsuit settled about the road fee tax, there's a lot of questions out there, and I think cities need more. I mean, if they're like us, it's been like hoarding to wait till it doesn't grow, and now it's like, hey, release it. There's other implications. I know there's people working on.
I'll bring it up in the executive director report, because the finality came, obviously there was the Supreme Court decision, but the ultimate finality came Friday afternoon after we done the agenda. So I'll put a pin in it. I'll come back.
So 2 more quick questions then. Looking forward now, instead of looking backward, are there big move legislative parties who would like us to bring the LP or UEOC this year? And are there research priorities you would want us to look at this next year? Again, these aren't things you necessarily have to think of right now. If you have ideas, but we're, like I said, we're in that phase where we're starting to gather and prioritizing for this next year, and then figuring out what we want to take to committees as well as the UEOC. So if there's ideas you have right now, feel free to call them out. If there's things you'd like us to tackle and look at, but also as you're biking down the road and you think of your idea, you can also always email and text as well, and we'll get them on the list.
No chance of saying, hey, we've done all this work, let's see if it's working or not.
We will definitely try that one again. We will make the pitch probably every year.
All of the UEOC seen that polling from earlier in the packet, because that's impactful. I mean, my city's in the middle of a general plan update, and I've had some interesting feedback from residents as we go through that process, and it matches what that poll said.
Yeah, and that's not everyone on the UEOC would have seen that at this point, so I think that's a good thing
Yeah,
to
because
share.
the UEOC stopped meeting, right?
Thank goodness they took a
First
break.
voted.
I'm not sure.
In May though,
No, April. I'm not sure I would call it a break, because
usually May.
they
We're
moved it
moving
up.
a month.
Yeah, they moved it up.
In fact, the UEOC staff reached out to us during the last week of the session and said, can you get us the league priorities by March 10th? To which Justin and I said, absolutely not.
We just laughed at Kyle.
But the
It's
youth,
hard for us.
We said, Kyle, that's adorable. No.
but the UEOC will have their first meeting April 12th. So this is the last board meeting, the only board meeting before the UEOC kicks off for the interim. But they will meet on May 3rd to finalize the list, and we'll have mid-year in between those. So the board will get another bite at the apple at the April meeting. That's why we wanted to ask the big picture question now. Your materials include what we've already started gathering, but if there are items you just want to get on the radar screen now, and then know we'll have a more robust discussion at the April meeting.
I just, back to the question I put in the chat, about process and efficiency with the UEOC. It seems like a lot of our participation, meaning Don's participation, it was the uphill battle the whole time. And really, like, okay, we have the league on there because we're supposed to, but we're gonna go ahead in our own way. And so I was wondering, with the process and procedure, if we feel that we still have an adequate voice, or are we always going to be on the defense and fighting so hard that last month before legislative session and then during the legislative session? I mean, we appreciate the mayor and all that she did, but it's, is it for efficiency? What it seems like it was formed for efficiency. And as to Justin's point, they finished 2 hours early, but did the process go the way we think it should go? Or is there an ability to say, we want to be more proactive and actually have them listen to the proactive part, not just the defensive?
Maybe can I answer that? Is that okay? Carrie, that's a really good point, a really good point, and very astute to know that it is an uphill battle there, and that we are in the minority in how we feel about some of the things that are being presented. That being said, I think it's so good that we have a seat at that table, and being the only voice of opposition, that's never fun. But being able to say why, and to say, you know, some of these proposals you're proposing that you're all getting excited about, these are the reservations we have as cities, so we're going to go back and work on that. But you need to know we're not supportive of this, or we don't like this, or this isn't okay. Actually led to our ability to be so successful, I think, in this session. I think they knew up front, okay, we already know they don't like this. We already know that this is something we have to rethink. They brought this to our attention. And everyone at the table, everyone in the room then knows, okay, these are things, this isn't just going to happen quickly or quietly or easily, because it shouldn't, because we've got to get to the right outcomes, and we've got to be mindful of ripple effects and the impact that they'll have on all of the stakeholders. And so it's been actually, I think, super helpful that cities have. It's not just a token seat. It has resulted in significant impact in the work that nobody can accuse us of trying to come in, you know, unknowingly. We make it very clear at UEOC, which isn't always easy, but I think is important to make it really clear. These are the things we have concerns with, and so we're going to keep working with all of you on them. But no, we're not voting in support of that. We have concerns about this, and then we keep working. But it opens the door from the get-go, and I think
Well, I think
a lot of good outcomes.
Yeah, I think it turned out really well, and thank you for being that voice for us. I really appreciate it, because I know how hard it was, and it was helpful as we talked to different legislators to say what we had been doing, and every time you came to a meeting, giving us a report back, shifting, going forward again. Do you feel that now that they've experienced it through one session now, that there's a little bit more of a you know, do they see us more as a partner now, and not just as a defense, but to actually start on a different level coming in April, to partner with the league on a few more issues, and not just come in with the bulldog attitude that we saw originally?
I think that's a good question too. We've actually had 2 sessions now, 2 years of Unified Economic Opportunity Commission that I don't know that they even see it as coming in with a bulldog attitude. They just know what they want to accomplish and find out, you know, sometimes they may have an idea, the league might not like this, but I don't think they actually come into the room thinking, all right, we have this agenda and the league's going to hate it, but we're going to do it anyway. I don't believe that's the mindset they're coming into with some of these proposals. I really don't. I think there's some reasonableness there, and sometimes it's a lack of mindfulness maybe, but then that's an opportunity that we have to say, hey, for a few reasons we don't actually love that idea, and let us explain why, and work with you to help inform you about why, and educate the process, and work together, and you can explain to us. So I haven't actually seen that they've come in with really a bulldog attitude, even though it does feel that way sometimes, and sitting at that table it does, and representing cities sometimes it does, but I think at least on the UEOC, we're viewed reasonably as a partner. Do you think? Am I wrong on that? That's been my interpretation. I do think that we're seen as a partner, and I think we're maximizing the opportunity to be at that table. And I think it's having a very positive impact on the outcomes, but it's a ton of work all year from everybody to get there.
The Mayor Ramsey is the only person in 2 years of the UEOC who has ever cast a vote other than yes. She's the only one, but we, yeah, I think we have demonstrated to them our partnership level, and let me, one of the behind the scenes pieces, and Mayor Tran served on one of the subcommittees, and there are several other league members. We were successful last year at getting league representation on every subgroup in the UEOC. So there'd be times we had talked to other stakeholders and they had no idea these subgroups were meeting, but we had representation on every one of them. So I do think they view us as partners because we've stepped forward and engaged within the process. So topics wise, I'm conscientious of the ticking clock here. I saw there was a comment, I can only see the bottom half of it.
You want me to read a couple of these?
No, let's go to,
Right here.
yeah, go ahead, if you can just read down.
So we had Councilmember Phillips say, looking ahead to 2024, I have continuing concerns over billboard legislation. Cities must be able to control billboard legislation for their individual municipalities. Please keep an eye on that during interim and upcoming meetings. So we have some thanks to Mayor Ramsey. Another thanks.
Nick, will you run down to the list that's in the packet?
The one other thing I will note on the UEOC, which is interesting, is
Sorry, what list?
So it's in the memo in the advocacy section.
Oh, the UEOC.
Yeah,
list.
yeah. So the one thing I'll note is that most of the individuals who serve on the UEOC have their boss as the chair of the committee, meaning most of the people on that answer to the governor. So that's one of the reasons that our voice, one is different because we don't answer directly to the governor. I mean, the counties are in the same spot there, but most of the other people on there do, other than the speaker and the president.
And
So-
anybody else on the committee answers to them.
Yeah.
Yes, it really.
So we don't answer to anyone else on that committee. So it's also not a little bit surprising that we may have a different voice because we're not answering to our boss or looking at how he votes before we vote
It's
either.
surprising that there hasn't been another.
You would think another one might.
Yeah, I'm told that there's been some work on that to try to help. Actually, one thing I do have to say, and I've got to give credit, there are some folks that sit around that table that look at me and want me to tell them how we feel kind of before we vote. There's some, just eyes, there's not text or anything, but just kind of eyes like, are you guys okay with that? Or I'll take the opportunity to explain it. And then they do understand it. They do listen. It really is important for us to be at that table. I think we really are getting a lot out of this.
Mayor Ramsey, how many people are on that? On that?
11. How many are there? 11? 11. The governor, the speaker, the president. We get one, the counties get one. It's a 4-year term. And there's members of the governor's cabinet.
Yeah,
And
Department of Transportation, Department of Commerce,
education,
Natural Resources, Higher Ed,
higher ed, yeah.
Sydney Dixon, Public Ed, GOPB, Workforce Services and Ag. So they're mostly cabinet positions.
And Teresa Foxley was there with you, but as a non-voting member.
Non-voting member,
Non-voting
yes.
member. Kind of a wise consultant, and so I'm guessing they'll probably.
Yeah, we've got
send
3
them
non-voting members on there.
invitation as well, but that's who it's made up of, and everyone's on there for a 4-year term. And then, well, they've added the CHA though. Now, is it Lincoln that will have that seat? Lincoln Fillmore has a permanent seat. Now they added the Commission on Housing Affordability, so. It's a robust discussion that brings in, and I appreciate the expertise from the different department heads that are there, the cabinet members and stuff, but ours is a different approach, a different take. And so it will always come across as a different take because we're nothing.
One of the things that I think we might do, and I think it just requires more effort by us, league staff and us, is to coordinate better with UAC. I mean, I think that got a little bit better this last year, but they've been MIA on some stuff that they could be helpful.
Right.
They actually did come forward and help us with a couple of bills this year where we did some exceptional outreach, I think.
Yeah.
But we should maybe focus on.
And I appreciate that too. And also in the staff's defense, they have definitely been the ones proactively trying to reach out to UAC as well. But anything any of us can do to kind of encourage our friends in our counties to pay attention, to have their organization pay closer attention to what's happening there, and to be mindful of how they are voting. That would be helpful. Gage Frower represents the counties from Weber County. He is the county representative on there. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. They have not been at the table as much as we would like. This.
Any final thoughts on anything looking forward?
So Nick, can you just scan down? Again, we put a list in your packet of what we already know is out there. So Councilmember Phillips, billboards was on that list. But are there,
Cemetery surprised me. Why cemeteries?
that came up in the board meeting last year and we just ran out of bandwidth to make a.
Gary, we didn't forget about cemeteries from last year.
So that's not a UEOC item, that's just our general internal item. But are there any other items that aren't yet on this list, but that are just front of mind for you that you want us to put on the list? Not that we have to vote on the UEOC list right now, but just so we can get started.
So like I'm meeting with my whole delegation in Utah County on Thursday and then one-off start. So can I meet with them and kind of pick their brains and then put together something and.
Yeah, that'd be
set it
great.
up?
Wouldn't it be phenomenal to hear what they're thinking? Yeah.
That'd be great. Also, I would recommend, so the subcommittees of the UEOC do a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting. There's a lot of time that is put into determining what comes back to the UEOC, what's presented to the UEOC to vote on. And everybody on the UEOC board serves on a subcommittee. But as Cameron said, we were really very proactive in making sure we had somebody representing the league on every subcommittee, but they dissolve at the end of in January, it's time to dissolve. So in April, they'll start a new committees, new subcommittees will start to be formed, whatever. Not only do I recommend we keep making sure we have somebody on there, but if anybody wants to be part of it, it does take time. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of extra meetings, but it's important to have us at the table.
Yeah, and I was gonna add, I know we did a lot of defense in UEOC last year, but that was also more offensively and strategically to the government efficiency where we were able to push local administrative advisory through. So if there are any of those more proactive initiatives we want to push.
That's a good point. And they love that and making that fit. Really, everybody at the table loved that and recognized the value in that. So that really helped us get through to getting the support of the UEOC to vote for that.
Well, I think participation in the committees is important. I mean, I wasn't actually on the committee, the affordability committee, but it was important for us to be there and speak up, just because that stopped the committee report from just being a one-sided thing, that had to give deference to some of the things that we had said, so.
Any other initial thoughts? Again, the UEOC will meet April 12th and then May 3rd. So we'll have the April board meeting to do a little deeper dive, but are there any initial thoughts on topics that people want to bring up?
I guess my only thing would be, are we going to be revisiting gravel pits at all? It's not been signed yet, but
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
The meeting goes on. Yeah. Okay, Justin, you want to do guiding our growth? We have about 5 minutes.
I would do guiding our growth really quickly. So you can see the information in your packet. I guess a couple quick takeaways from this one. We'll just do top line on this. One, a lot of this came from we talked about we need to have a conversation around growth. That was heard. This is a kind of a UEOC objective from last year that's still going on. Laura Hansen with GOPB, Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, will be joining us at our mid-year conference to talk about this more in depth and get some more feedback. But this is an ongoing project, so watch for that. We're engaged in this one. We've had staff they're part of it. If you look at when they talk about their key partners, we're listed on there. So this is the ongoing effort to have the conversation with Utahns in general, not just elected officials, not just this type of crowd, but to talk about in general with Utahns about what growth looks like and what comes out of that. So feel free to look at those materials in the packet. And then, like I said, Laura will be here at mid-year to continue that conversation.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've been participating in the meetings on this, but there's a website that at least trial, it hasn't gone live yet, but it's going to be a survey. And it's actually pretty useful, I think, in terms of explaining what people people might think about in terms of various options towards handling growth. And what the consequences of some of those choices might be, in terms of whether you choose to put more multifamily in a place or not, or don't do that and things. So, I actually really like what they've been doing. Yeah, I think it would be useful. The question is really going to be whether we can get enough participation in it, because I think it's going to be self-selected, voluntary kind of stuff, and whether we get enough feedback to actually be reliable, basically. Yeah, and the survey is pretty lengthy the way it's designed right now. It almost, to some extent, it needs to be, but it is going to require somebody to want to spend time on it.
Sure. And the last thing I'll point out in the packet, so May 11th at 9:30 a.m., the governor will have a press event at Redview Garden. We'll kind of kick this off more publicly. A lot of the discussion's been in the background, but want to say that date, May 11th at 9:30 a.m. That's when this will really kick off more publicly.
Perfect. Then Mayor Silvestrini, we as staff request a motion for the board to express appreciation to Representative White, Senator Fillmore, and their roles on the Commission on Housing Affordability with the housing bills, and to the Executive Appropriations Committee, which includes the leadership of both parties and both bodies for the partnership of this year. We'll drop the specifics of the letter, but we'd like to be able to say that the board affirmatively expressed support for those individuals.
Can I get a motion for that effect? I already spoke. Okay.
I second that.
We have a motion in a second.
Maybe required to wear leaf pins.
I am not amending.
Okay, I'll consider that discussion to the motion. And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, good.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Executive Director report. We're going to squeeze this down to 2.5 minutes. Alicia, I'll come to you in just a second on mid-year for the National League of Cities. I put a pin in it a couple of hours ago. Time always flies quickly. So if there are specific asks that you think we as a league should make of the delegation next week, just send us a note, send us an email. Generally speaking, when we see our role as being the connection between you as city leaders and the delegation, we will be following up on the rail safety piece. We'll follow up on the transportation bill or the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the rollout of that bill, as well as follow up on ARPA. Those are the high level city pieces. We don't get involved in specific appropriation requests. If you're asking for money for this particular project, that's not us. But if there's something you think we should also add as part of our outreach next week, let us know, and we'll see several of you in DC. Nick, do you want to make your ask about?
So I just want to say, maybe put this out there, and I don't know exactly what the mechanics of this are, and maybe nobody does, but to the extent we can get our delegation to be advocating for loosening or changing the regulatory framework with regard to lending for multifamily projects to allow some of those to be more owner occupied. I think that would serve our state in terms of affordable housing and also just getting people started on the path to home ownership with a condo or something like that. It's so difficult for our development community to finance those projects under the current framework that we have, that we're just seeing, total rentals. It's easier for them to do that than to do owner occupied. And it sure would be nice to invest in that.
Excellent. Councilmember McKay.
I was just going to mention, Riverton City requested from the post office to have all of our city within one zip code. We have a couple that are kind of up by Harriman that we found out that some of the door deliveries, the sales tax revenue was going to an adjoining city. And so the post office said, no, it didn't seem like they had even considered it. And so Burgess Owens actually is putting forward a bill on behalf of our city and other cities that would like to, have that issue fixed. So
That's great.
yeah, it's been great to work with us. And we just lost our communication director to him, so I'm sure it help, push it
You
on.
still have a really good in-them.
Excellent examples, and we can bring up. Thank you, Cole. If there are other items, just let us know this week. We'll see some of you in DC. Nick, we make a 30-second announcement about the DC events.
Yes, so we every year host a few events while we're at the NLC Congressional Cities Conference. We'll be doing a breakfast on Sunday, just before the opening session, which starts Sunday this year, which is a change. We will do a dinner on Monday, and then we will do a meeting in the Senate Visitors Center, hosted by Senator Romney in the afternoon of Tuesday. Afternoon was the only time we could get. For some of you who I know who have RSVP'd and are attending, it may not work with the flight back that you'll be taking in the evening. So if you are attending and haven't gotten back to me on whether or not your RSVP has changed because of that afternoon scheduling, please let me know. But it should be good.
So quick show of hands, for those of you who are going to DC, how many of you are available that Tuesday afternoon to join the meeting? We'll have Senator Lee at the beginning and Senator Romney at the end, but who's available? We need to give them an accurate count so we know if it's worth having a big room or not.
It depends entirely on whether you can get our roller bags into the Capitol for this meeting and then have a giant Uber waiting for us.
And have league pins.
Right. Let me ask this. How many people who are going to DC are on the 5:15 Tuesday night flight? Okay, so Clear, is it your whole delegation, Clearfield? Bountiful, most is on the 5:15. Yeah, Gary, I saw your hand raised. Mayor Johnson, others online. Who, are you on the 5:15 Tuesday afternoon?
I'm flying in early, but I will be there.
Okay. Anybody else flying back to Salt Lake Tuesday afternoon at 5:15? Okay, so it sounds like, okay, so for those who are going to DC, just, we need to be able to give Romney and Lee an accurate count of who's going to be there, because we may not need a big room. It may just be a smaller meeting based on the logistics.
So I'm working through those RSVPs and I've received a few of your emails as well. So we'll put all that together. Just go ahead and email me if anything has changed.
On the breakfast, I won't probably make it because I'm speaking for the general session, general session.
We'll be there by the general.
Yeah, we'll be there.
That time?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll be there, but you should be,
Especially now that you're speaking.
No, it's okay.
I'm not gonna make the breakfast either. I have to fly red eye Sunday. I'll be stuck at JFK for 3 hours during the breakfast time to get there, just laying over, just waiting. So I won't make the breakfast either, but I'll be there.
Great.
Great. Okay, Alicia, 30 seconds on the Tim Shriver update, please.
Yeah, just really quickly, I hope that you're coming to mid-year conference in April in St. George. We are lucky that we were able to confirm Dr. Tim Shriver from Unite and the Dignity Index. Also, Tim Shriver's family started the Special Olympics. He's the board chair and his mother is Eunice Kennedy Shriver. So he's had a lifelong career in education and public service. His address is going to be on Unite and the Dignity Index and how we can all learn to get along and be more civil in government. So it'll be a really useful address to fire us up about the Unite project that we're working on with Tammy Pfeiffer, who used to be in Governor Herbert's cabinet. She's chief of staff and she will be there. Along with Natalie Gochner, we've partnered with the Gardner Policy Institute. And so we're hoping to be the pilot project for Unite and roll this out in our own communities and in our teams. So making a plan for you all to come to mid-year and hear Dr. Shriver.
And to piggyback on what Alicia just presented, you as a board gave us direction at the end of last calendar year to partner on the Dignity Index and be part of this Unite project. We had assigned our deputy director to do it, and then the state hired Rachel away. We're still in the process of finishing up the interviews and hope to have a deputy in place by mid-year. So we're still moving forward though with that partnership, and Tim Shriver as the keynote will be the first piece of that. So Alicia, thanks for coordinating that. During mid-year, we have a board meeting on Wednesday afternoon. So it's before the programming officially starts. And here's what we hope to hit at that April meeting. We want to revisit the organizational strategic goals, because that's really your last chance to give us feedback before we bring a budget to you in May. We have sent the dues letters out based on your direction in January. We just wrote a dues letter hitting the highlights of our accomplishments over the last year, but at mid-year, we'll have an updated report. Timing wise, we just couldn't have a report done before the end of the session. So there'll be this report that will circulate to all the cities as well. And certainly could use your help in circulating this information. So cities recognize the value that they get from being part of the league, and the strength of the league really is the membership, and we need to have that unified voice. We also will bring you an amended budget, and we'll carry out over these conversations that we started today about UEOC and legislative priorities, research priorities, and the like. And we also have several key members of our extended family who are set to retire in the months to come, and we want to figure out a way to pay tribute to them. Even though some of them haven't officially announced their dates yet, we know it's coming. And then last but not least, transportation utility fees. So near the end of the session, Pleasant Grove won the lawsuit at the Supreme Court, where the Utah Supreme Court said, yes, Pleasant Grove, and by extension, Provo and Highland and other cities, Farmington, Kaysville, you have the authority to do a transportation utility fee, and it's not a tax. It's a fee, it's not a tax, but they left open the question of whether or not Pleasant Grove's methodology was reasonable. Friday afternoon, the plaintiffs dropped the rest of the lawsuit, so it's no longer going back to district court for the reasonableness standard. So transportation utility fee is now, per the Supreme Court, an acceptable tool for cities to use. Yes. Now, here's the asterisk that we've been expecting for years. We have actually fought off repeatedly in the past few years legislative efforts to preempt our ability to do transportation utility fee, and we actually use the litigation as a reason why. And so the legislature shouldn't step in until the court has ruled. Well, prior to me being at the league, we went through this with impact fees, where cities imposed impact fees under your inherent authority to impose fees. The court ultimately agreed, and then the legislature came back and put some guardrails on how we could do impact fees. So my point in bringing it up, council member, is stay tuned. There are legislators who are already interested in this. We are waiting to see the second piece on reasonableness. Now, as of Friday, with that plug being pulled, I expect this to be a bigger issue. It's why it's already on our list for the interim. So maybe ready for a deeper dive discussion in April. So stay tuned. The UCM, the City Managers Association, will be doing a deeper dive on it as part of their conference in April too.
And I think it may be worth mentioning too, that not only, I mean, that kind of legislation could affect not only transportation, but a lot of us charge stormwater utility fees. It's the same concept. And so there's a lot of, there could be a lot of impact upon us in terms of the ability to maintain our infrastructure.
Yep, but it was a huge win for local governments. So publicly, I want to thank Pleasant Grove and many cities, and the league offered support to Pleasant Grove, but thank you to Pleasant
And a lot
Grove
of
for fighting the
cities
good
did
fight.
too.
Provo.
Yeah, a lot of
We
cities
gave money to
financially.
pay for their legal fees so
Yep.
that they could fight a good fight.
Yep. Yep, there's a huge win for all of us. And I think that's a good way to wrap the meeting up. Sorry, we're a few minutes late, but we'll see some of you at DC next week. And we'll hopefully see everyone for mid-year conference next month in sunny St. George. Right, Mayor Randall? It's gonna be sunny. Should be nice for something to be sunny.
Councilmember Malkovich would like to know, would you like us to be at the governor's press conference on May 11th?
Stay tuned. We're working out those details.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned.